broadcasting right now on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, LinkedIn, VK, and I don't know, maybe somewhere else. Hopefully all the places I mean to be on and not ones I don't mean to be on. If I'm accidentally broadcasting on your Facebook page, I'm sorry. I don't think I am, though. Start out with a song. And if anybody is watching and can tell me if everything sounds okay or if it sounds horrible, because this mic is not the one picking up my voice and it's actually the laptop by accident, or, just if it sounds awful, tell me. I'll tell you a story, although it's one you already know. It only started a few months back when a new flu virus began to attack the bodies of human beings. People were shocked by what they were seeing, getting sick and moving past. It was time to act and act fast. The Chinese people mobilized. The world watched with wide open eyes. The hospital built in 10 days flat in Wuhan City in the year of the rat, in the year of solidarity, when whatever your ideology, all that remained was the simple call. Injury to one is an injury to all. We're in this together. That's the score, as with this virus and so much more. From South Africa to Iran, from New York to Wuhan. The virus spread everywhere through the droplets in the air, contained in China but overseas. With every airplane, every cough or sneeze, it became clear just a bit too late. In the Western capitalist states, collective action is what we need, not your mansions or your greed. Landlords and tenants, poor and rich, in the same boat, ain't that a bitch? Suddenly all the world's wealth won't protect the public health unless all the public has a patch of land where they can isolate and wash their hands. Now even the careless have to care, since we're all breathing the same air. We're in this together, that's the score, as with this virus and so much more. From Kenya to Iran, from Venice to Wuhan. The future now is yet unwritten. What will become of these politicians who sold their stocks when they knew what the state was going to have to do? Who had to act but did so late? The time was now, but they'd hesitate. Batten the hatches, count your beans, and find out what exponential means. In the aftermath, with millions dead, might our species come out ahead? A teachable moment if there ever was one. The same earth, the same moon, the same sun, the same water, the same air, the same blood, the same skin, the same hair, the same feelings, the same desire, the same world underwater or on fire. We're in this together, that's the score, as with this virus and so much more. From Argentina to Iran, from Portland to Wuhan. I'll tell you a story, although it's one you already know. It only started a few months back when a new flu virus began to attack. Oh, good. I've inspired somebody to restring their guitar. Excellent. That is exactly how it should be. And that's great to see people out there watching and listening. And I'm very open to any questions or comments or anything like that that anybody may have. The first and most important one being, can you hear me? And that has been answered, so that's always really good. I particularly just wanted to mention as being here in Portland, Oregon, like I imagine one or two people out there who are watching, although of course I notice, there are half of you are in Europe, but that's how it is on the internet, which is wonderful. But I'm in Portland, Oregon, part of the United States, where there is a unfolding catastrophe, as there is unfolding in many other countries, and less so in some countries out there that have gotten control of it through effective governance, places like China and Germany. But here in the United States, where we don't have effective governance, it's a unfolding catastrophe of fairly biblical proportions. And one of the consequences of the catastrophe here is mass unemployment and suddenly tens of millions of people being thrown into despair and desperate poverty, which may or may not be alleviated by government programs, which hopefully will kick in soon. We'll see about that. We're not used to government programs actually helping anybody here in the U.S., so we're all very skeptical about this idea, but it could work out. It is in their interests, after all, to prevent a revolution, so we'll see about that. But in the meantime, there's a rent strike going on here in Portland and all over the place. Of course, it's a fairly symbolic kind of effort, really. I mean, I think it's very good that we're calling it a rent strike, but in fact, there is a suspension on evictions, on late fees, and on eviction notices for 90 days here in Oregon. And I have been noticing as I walk around the town talking to people that actually very few renters are aware of the 90-day suspension on eviction. So if you happen to be in Oregon, or you know anybody in Oregon, and I'm sure this applies to other places where there's a suspension on evictions, which is I think many other states at this point, you should tell them about that, because the first thing people should do when they are running out of money, if you're a renter, is stop paying the rent. And if you are paying a mortgage, stop paying the mortgage. There is you can you negotiate deferring your mortgage, or you can just stop paying. They're not going to be evicting anybody during the crisis, and they're not going to be foreclosing on your house during the crisis. And if they try to do that, then you're going to have a lot of solidarity from a lot of other people. If you reach out, if you don't act like a individualistic victim and, hang out in your house with your gun waiting for the cops to come, or whatever stupid American thing you're going to do, you got to work with other people in solidarity with them. And if your neighborhood forms a strike committee and an anti-eviction squad, and actually shows up when the cops show up to evict and that sort of thing, there's a lot of precedent for that, and it can work very well. But the first thing we need to do is let people know about the suspension on evictions. Tell people about it in whatever possible forums you can, that they do not have to pay their rent if they're living in Oregon, and they certainly don't have to pay their mortgage if they're living in the United States and can negotiate a deferment. And in many countries in Europe, as many of you Europeans already know, and hopefully those of you who are not from Europe will also soon learn about, many European countries have suspended mortgage payments and rent payments for the next X amount of time or foreseeable future, or however they're defining these things. These kinds of things can be done. Governments can enact this kind of legislation. So, but I wanted to mention for any of you specifically out there in Oregon or anywhere on the West Coast of the United States who are living in a building owned by the Randall Group, which is my landlord, and many of you out there in the U.S., the 40 million renters among you who may be listening who are from the U.S., are living in similar situations where it's and whether it is or not, in many ways it's irrelevant. But many of you are living in apartment complexes that are owned by corporations like the Randall Group or like what's the one? Another big one. There's a lot of these. The one that owns Wimbledon around here, the Wimbledon housing project. There's a lot of these massive landlords, companies, real estate companies that own hundreds or sometimes thousands of buildings and units up and down the West Coast or around the country or the world. And the Randall Group is one of them. And they actually raised the rent in a letter to me dated on March 25th, which I'm sure went out to lots of other of their tenants across the buildings they own that are administered by their management company, CTL Management. They actually announced an increase in the rent. They gave notice. They said on July 1st, your rent is going to increase, which they do every year. But in the course of a global pandemic and quarantine and mass unemployment, for them to announce another rent raise is way more than unconscionable. And but what they have done, what they did after I sent them my letter, and my open letter to my landlord, which is also published on Counterpunch. If you want to read it, I think it's pretty good, and you can write one like that to your landlord too. But after I sent them that, then I very quickly got a form. Even though you have 5 days to pay the rent, very quickly after they got my basically my notification that I wasn't going to be paying the rent, which is required under this suspension, for whatever that means. They still can't evict you, but they do tell you to notify the landlord. So I notified the landlord, and I got this response, which was basically saying that there were several boxes and that they could check, and the one that was checked was that I was unemployed due to the crisis and would not be paying the rent for the month of April. But there were other boxes that they made it appear that they had the power as the landlord to have checked if they had wanted to, which indicated that I did not, that I was not unemployed due to the crisis, and that I owed them the rent. So which they can't do actually, because there's a suspension on evictions. It's not a suspension only for people who have been who have been laid off due to the crisis. At least in Portland, it's not, and I'm in Portland, and the anti-eviction law is stronger here than it is in the state, and incidentally, the reason why that's the case is because 2 of the 4 city councilors are radicals, and we need at least one more, and her name is Margot Black. And if you're a Portland resident, you need to be voting for her in May, Margot Black. And then if we get her on the city council too, and we don't lose either of the 2 wonderful women who are on the city council now, Chloe Eudaly and Joanne Hardesty, as long as we can keep them and get Margot on the council, we will have a radical majority on the Portland City Council, and that would be something to really celebrate. And the landlords are very much working against that. They're running a former mayor against Chloe Eudaly, and you can be sure that if Margot's campaign gets off the ground, they'll be gets further up off the ground, that they will be. I think she's already a leading candidate, but soon, they're going to be going after her, and we need to be supporting her. If you're here in Portland. But the main thing I wanted to say about getting these notifications from your landlords, if you are anywhere and you're not paying the rent, is that whatever your local city council or state legislature or whatever kinds of laws they've passed, and I think this applies to in other countries as well. These principles apply, okay? But wherever you are, if the authorities have or the landlord is telling you something about you should pay all or part of the rent or whatever, the situation is very fluid, and the situation is one that is going to be defined by us depending on what we do. And of course, it's going to be defined by the fact that millions of people in the U.S. are unable, possibly tens of millions, are unable to pay the rent this month, and certainly even more so next month, unless they're getting a real big windfall from the government. but yeah, they're unable to pay. But it's so the people wanted to take more proactive action than just being unable to pay. So if the landlords don't actually make serious concessions and the governments don't make serious concessions, then they face consequences, which are currently going to involve a whole lot of people not paying the rent regardless, but soon if those consequences will be greater than just a lot of people not paying the rent, but it will be more like a lot of angry class conscious people not paying the rent and feeling very resentful about the fact that the landlords are trying to make them pay the rent under these circumstances, as they've been raising the rents in so many of these cities such as Portland, Seattle, San Francisco, LA, New York, etc., for decades. So that's my little update on the Randall Group rent strike. And now I'll sing another song. Because of the nature of live streaming and broadband and all that, everything sounds a lot more compressed when I'm singing than when I'm talking. So I tend to talk a lot in these broadcasts. I think that's probably appropriate. But if you want me to sing, just shout out a song title, as long as it's not one of the top 5 songs on Spotify, on my Spotify page. There's foreboding. You can't find a place, and you're from here. You're looking for a place to live, and you're from Portland. Yeah, that's once you don't have a place, you can't not pay rent on a place that you don't live in. That is one of those major quandaries. Yeah, it's a whole other situation. There's foreboding in the air, waiting for an earthquake. Pandemic spreading, no telling how it might remake a world so divided in so many, many ways. Anyone can see it's no way to greet such days when you can shut your borders, but it'll barely slow the spread with 1 million people homeless and not enough hospital beds. In times like these, we find out that a society is only just as strong as our solidarity. The foreboding in the air can get only thicker as we see our leaders passing blame and getting sicker. A crashing economy, leaders fraught with indecision, only capable of thinking like bought-off politicians. Not enough testing kits, and the ones you got were broken, but hey, the president has spoken. In times like these, we find out that a society is only just as strong as our solidarity. 1 million people wake up in the morning thinking thoughts they never had till they found out they were sinking on a cruise ship full of holes where if you can't catch the breeze, there are no fences tall enough to keep out the disease. Lifting every boat or watching them all sink, ready or not, we're standing on the brink. In times like these, we find out that a society is only just as strong as our solidarity. Contain an epidemic like in Wuhan or in Seoul, or watch a catastrophe take its toll. Hide behind our gates, cowering, afraid, or organize our neighbors in mutual aid. In synchronicity, such great things can be done. A planet to lose, or a world to be won. In times like these, we find out that a society is only just as strong as our solidarity. In times like these, we find out that a society is only just as strong as our solidarity. just if it seems like a very weird pause as I look at the screen after I play songs on these live stream broadcasts, I think it's worth mentioning just generally that I'm probably not the only person who does live stream broadcasts, sings a song, and then looks at the screen. It's like instead of applause, there's silence while the artist looks at the screen. But I'm so conscious of every time I touch my face. We all touch our faces a lot, and I have a nice nose for touching. It's very good, as long as you're not going to be then touching somebody you've never met before, which I won't do here in the living room, so it's okay. So we look at the screen to look at messages, and there are messages, in fact. And Yuppie Scum was one request, and gosh, I really need to relearn that song, but I can do a song that's very much along those lines. Oh, see, then people make wonderful, obscure song requests of songs that I haven't done in a very long time. Famine, Flood, and Fire. That song request, it's so funny how that the idea of famine, flood, and fire almost seems kind of quaint compared to the current pandemic. I thought the concept of famine, flood, and fire all happening at the same time seemed pretty dire, and actually it does, but still, things could get worse. But my favorite comment there is the one that doesn't involve singing a song, actually. But although I did say I take requests, and I really will. But any advice on topical songwriting? Jay Hubbard says, been enjoying your work for many years now. Thanks for all you do for the world and the working class. That is and then the request got seconded by somebody on YouTube, but that seconded was for singing Yuppie Scum, and there's a lot of dislike of Yuppie Scum, and I shared that. So I'm going to talk about Yuppie Scum in some form or another, and also other things. Oh, wonderful! Hi from Japan, and that person's name is in kanji, so I don't even know what it says. That's wonderful. That's real evidence of being Japanese. And when your name is in kanji. Rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. Yeah, that is one of my favorite themes for songwriting. Okay, but anyway, getting back to this advice on topical songwriting. Yes, Jay, I do have advice on topical songwriting. And my biggest piece of advice for topical songwriting, and this is, by the way, something I'm going to give you some advice on topical songwriting here right now. Let me talk about that for a minute here, because this is not just Jay. This is a lot of other people potentially, I think, out there who are, all of you potentially, who are artists, writers, songwriters, any number of other things. Many people out there are spending a lot of time alone in quarantine situations, or just with one other person that you're spending too much time with and would like to separate yourself from in some physical space, for some period of time with headphones or whatever it is you're doing to stay sane, however, whatever your situation is. But one of those things that is just amazing for occupying a lot of time in ways that are just that feel very productive and really it can be an elating experience is writing or working on a project of any kind, whether it's a song or a book or an article or artwork or any number of other things. Writing and projects, you can just suck down an entire day with a project and you don't know what happened to it. You start writing an article or a chapter in a book or a song, and before you know it, it is nighttime and you can barely see, and your hand is cramped, and there goes the whole day. And this can happen to anybody. You can get into the zone. You don't need cannabis for that, probably, but or caffeine, but I find the combination is helpful. But you can get into the zone. Anybody can get into the zone with or without the aid of drugs. And once you're there, you can do amazing things with that space. And it's not that you necessarily will start creating brilliant artwork immediately, but you get into the zone and you will feel good and happy, and you will create artwork. And if you keep on working at it, you'll create great artwork eventually. Anybody will if you keep on working at it. But it does probably, not only do you have to keep on working at it, but you have to do it with a certain orientation. And that orientation being like brutal honesty with yourself about what you're doing and whether it's any good, for one thing. But also, one of the most key pieces of advice I'd have for topical songwriting, other than just that it's fun and you should do it, is tell one story. Just tell a story, and that's you don't need to tell more than one story. Just tell a story. And actually, it's really better if you generally don't try to tell more than one story. If you're trying to tell more than one story, that other story should be totally central to the reason why you have to tell the other story. I mean, it should be absolutely part of the first story you're telling. Like the reason why you have to tell the second story. It has to be really. But really, it's best to tell one story. Stick to the facts, whatever kind of story you're telling. If it's possible to stick to the facts, if you're telling a story from history or from something that just happened in the world, stick to the facts. Don't make anything up, and really tell as little of the facts as necessary in order to communicate what you're communicating, and let the way that you phrase things communicate the message as much as what you're saying. How you're saying it, how the music goes is just as important as what you're saying. But what's also vitally important is tell a simple story and don't try to tell more of a story than necessary. And then tell me how it goes. And then we can take it from there. And we've had a bunch of song requests, and I'm going to address that a bit here now. I'm especially interested in requests of songs having to do with solidarity with the 99% and hatred of yuppie scum. That's the combination, and all the requests have fit into those categories. So maybe because most of my songs fit into one of those categories. Song from my friend Bob Steck, who died some years ago now. They were old when I was young. Now they've all but passed away. Now it's just a second-hand memory of the day when from all around the world they sailed off to Spain, where they fought against the fascists, where so many men were slain. Who will recall the days when they all stood side by side, now that the last Lincoln veteran died? Beside Martin Luther King, or in a veterans parade, you could see the men who made the journey to join the 15th Brigade. When men of many nations, of most every creed and hue, Catholics and Protestants, atheists and Jews, joined together in the trenches to turn back the fascist tide, now that the last Lincoln veteran died. The working class of many nations joined in a desperate bid with what weapons they could find. They fought to save Madrid from Brussels and Berlin, Galway and London town. Who will recall the brigadistas who tried to take the fascists down? There beside the Spanish people, even the figs and olives cried, now that the last Lincoln veteran died. The Republic had the people, but the fascists had the tanks. Il Duce and Der Fuhrer deserve only some of Franco's thanks. 'Cause the fuel to move the armor came from the USA. And the men that they gunned down were from New York and Frisco Bay. Uncle Sam said he was neutral. Who will remember how he lied now that the last Lincoln veteran died? They say people get conservative the older that they age. They say that being radical is just a youthful phase, but the finest communist I've known lived to 95, and he spent his whole life striving for humanity to thrive. To forget these fallen heroes is something I cannot abide, now that the last Lincoln veteran died. Now that the last Lincoln veteran died. And looking at the screen again. Buffering. Goal today. Cesar's goal is to write a song called Cannabis and Caffeine. That's an excellent idea. It's probably been done. I should write one too. Actually, we should all write songs about cannabis and caffeine and make a hour-long broadcast out of songs about cannabis and caffeine. I think that would be a very appropriate COVID-19 project. Although in the Netherlands, friends report that the coffee shops, which is what they call the places that sell cannabis in the Netherlands, although they also sell coffee, oftentimes not as good as the actual cafe's coffee. But if I were to open a coffee shop in the Netherlands, we would sell both good pot and good coffee, but that's besides the point. But the coffee shops in the Netherlands, actually, when they announced that all non-essential businesses had to close, for 24 hours, the Dutch coffee shops were also closed until they quickly thought better of it and opened them back up again. I was very happy to hear that little tale. Here in Portland, it looks like some of the coffee shops are closed. Some of the cannabis shops are closed, but others are open and selling through a sort of a little mail drop door kind of slot in their door. One that is open is on Division and 34th Brothers. They're doing it that way anyway. In case anybody's looking for where to buy pot in Portland, I can help you out. Let's see. Age of the Robber Barons. That's a good idea. Because that's what we are back in here. But there's a rent strike going on. There's a PDX rent strike group, which is really good. And it already had more than 500 members when I joined, so that was very exciting to me to see that they're. I'm ignoring all song requests that include the top 5 songs on Spotify, just to be mean, just to make sure I don't get too famous. Never playing my hits. Terrible. This is one that seems, I know I've had other requests and I'm ignoring them. I'm going to just do this song because it seems like I've just been thinking about, I don't know, there's so much about the Occupy Wall Street movement that is so extremely relevant to any financial collapse situation, but it's so relevant now. And And I just there's a much bigger rent strike going on now than certainly anything that was happening back then. Although there was the Occupy movement was really important, I think. I had my friend just said, "Let's go to Portland." I had to remind her we can't leave the house. Yeah, I know this kind of thing just keeps happening to me too. Like it's like always like, because especially on the weekends, it's like my wife's general tendency is, let's do something social. Like, okay, what are people doing now? I mean, it reminds me. There's a lot of societies in the world where on the weekends everybody does something. You know, like as a sort of individualistic American musician who spends all my time basically alone when I'm home and socially when I'm on tour, it's like quixotic kind of existence. But in most societies, most people aren't like that, and in much of the world, not just any particular part of the world, but and actually every continent of the world. It's very normal for people to do the same thing every Sunday. You know, like in Bonn, Germany, on a Sunday, something like half of the town's population is walking along the river and having a picnic. I mean, this is just what you do on a Sunday in Bonn, right? And this is very normal in a lot of places. And so what we do on the weekends, of course, is the same thing we're doing the rest of the time: stay home. So it's. But it actually does relate to why I chose Monday every week, Monday morning, to do this broadcast, because I'm doing lots of other broadcasts, but the regular weekly thing that I'm doing for free for everybody is Monday, and it's because like Monday, if you were a touring musician, or if you you'd be home on a Monday anyway. I mean, and if you're not working or you're unemployed or you're quarantined, Monday's like the least likely time that you'd want to do a show. And so it just felt like the best time to do a show to me. I don't know if that makes any sense. But this is a song I sang at a lot of Occupy encampments during Occupy Wall Street. And if that was going on now, I'd be doing it again. But as it is, I'll just sing it in your living room. Because this is where they buy the politicians. Because this is where power has its seat. Because 99% of us are suffering at the mercy of the madmen on this street. Because all of us are victims of class warfare being waged on us by the 1%. Because these greedy banksters rob the country, leaving us without the means to pay the rent. We're gonna stay right here. Gonna stay right here. Because both my parents lost their savings. Because I have never opened an account. Because the interest on my credit card just doubled. And now I can't pay the minimum amount. Because these budget cuts are just immoral. With our schools as overcrowded as they are. Because there are no buses where I live. But I can't afford to drive a car. So we're gonna stay right here. Gonna stay right here. Because it has been demonstrated amply that the winners are the ones who stick around. Because this world should belong to everyone, not just the banksters who would smash it to the ground. Because we've noticed voting doesn't change things when the politicians are mostly millionaires. Because we're learning how to stand up like Tunisians, like they did in Tahrir Square. We're gonna stay right here. We're gonna stay right here. Because corporations are not people, and we can't just let them choose. Because if we leave our fate to them, then all of us will surely lose. Because the climate clock is ticking, and we can't just leave our world behind. Because corporate rule isn't working, and it's time for humans' hearts and minds. So we're gonna stay right here. 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 Actually, it just occurs to me that's a good rent strike song. We're gonna stay right here. Chicago bank-owned building has been occupied by comrades and converted into a mutual aid hub. Fantastic. That is fantastic. And hello from Finland. And by the way, I don't know if Joanne was mentioning not having a place to live and being in Portland. I will just mention that right here in this apartment complex I live in on Francis Street, Francis Park Apartments, there are 2 vacant apartments that the manager has not been able to rent lately, probably because they're asking for too much money and nobody has it. I would very happily show you which apartments are vacant, but I can't tell you what's going to happen if you try to occupy either of them. But if you want to give it a shot, you will definitely have my support, and whatever that might possibly entail. And people are mentioning landlords. We have to do something else for landlords. And people were mentioning Yuppie Scum earlier and the song Landlord, but I'm going to do this one because I feel like it. Oh, I just put up something. I have a new thing on my website about doing these concerts on the internet and how it works, and if you want to sort of host one on your Facebook page and stuff like that. It's my latest post on Patreon. That's one place you can see that. Patreon.com/David Rovics. I can do concerts from your Facebook page, which is actually really cool. I just did it, done 2 so far, one for the National Union of Public and General Employees in Canada and one for a Belgian anarchist music club. And it was really cool to see that because it's broadcast on their pages, it's largely the people watching are people who they know and, who follow them on Facebook and stuff. So it ends up being kind of like a concert in a way, like for a specific group, even though it's online, public, and all that. My project is working on growing Richmond's capacity for spatial occupation. Good. As long as that means occupying space, then that's good. Yeah, squatting is what is needed. Address? What address? If you're talking about my address for the vacant apartments, Francis Park Apartments, just look it up in Portland. Do a search on Google, you'll find it. Hold on, we're connecting to your channels. That's a bad sign. Hopefully we're still broadcasting. Oh, chat is having problems apparently. But I think we're still broadcasting, so I will just keep on going here. if we live in a society, which we do, then the rich have to act like it. Oh, I'm not sure which numbers, but contact me privately and we'll figure that out. 10,000 yuppies just moved here. 10,000 others came last year. The rent has doubled since I moved in. Each month I take it on the chin. Each month I wonder, how many more can I stay in Portland before I move into my car or end up somewhere behind bars? 10,000 yuppies say don't complain now that the city is in the fast lane. It's just the market and it knows best. That's how the bankers built the West. So just get rich and you can stay. Otherwise just go away. There's no room here for us holding on under the bus. I'm just a renter. This ain't my town. Might as well just burn it down for all I care. $10,000 yuppies think it's great to invest in Portland real estate. Keep Portland weird, they like to say, but that was over yesterday. Of their achievements, they're so proud, living lives in some cloud, but unlimited data will get you nowhere if you can't afford to care. I'm just a renter, this ain't my town. Might as well just burn it down for all I care. $10,000 yuppies, and on each block they're flipping houses and taking stock. Where's the next place that can transform tents and mansions the new norm? They like TED Talks, they like greed, they like wine bars, they like weed, they like bike lanes, they want more. They're the face of the new class war. I'm just a renter, this ain't my town. Might as well just burn it down for all I care. For all I care. For all I care. And, oh good, it's still broadcasting. Excellent. And, yeah, so, I'm on davidrovics.com/quarantine. I have a section with all my COVID-19 related songs. And I will certainly do that. One of those song requests that just popped up on screen. And but I'll do the second one anyway. Of those two requests that just popped up, if anybody's watching on that particular platform. This is Henry says it's the first time you're awake when I'm live. Yeah, I usually do them. That's why I wanted to do it at 10 a.m. Pacific time every Monday, because I'm hoping that at least for people in anywhere in the Americas or anywhere in Europe, sort of west of the Ural Mountains, and anywhere in Africa, I mean, it should be a good time. So my apologies to everybody in Australia, New Zealand, and East Asia for whom this time sucks, but it should be a good time for a lot of other people in the world, which is the idea. The last armed uprising in Britain was in 1831, and it was very interestingly similar circumstances to the circumstances we find ourselves in so much of the world today, where all of a sudden there was a disaster that struck, and everybody's wages suddenly plummeted, and or everybody was suddenly unemployed, which is what happened in Wales, and it wasn't a pandemic. It was the mine owners changing their policies overnight and just letting all these 0-hour workers, as we might call them today, just letting them all go. And 1831, the age of industry begun. For the working folk of Wales, life was short. With wages cut again, it was only sensible that then folks took over, shut down the debtors' court. The gentry pulled the wire, told their men to open fire and restore the rule of their estate. But as the night descended and the battle ended, the soldiers had all fled behind a gate. They chanted cheese and bread, and our children must be fed in the days when Wales rose against the crown. They chanted cheese and bread with a bloody loaf above their heads when the red flag flew in Merthyr town. The message went out east and west to put the gentry to the test. The cavalry was ambushed and turned back. After so long playing defense, the time had come now when the workers were the ones on the attack. They chanted cheese and bread, and our children must be fed in the days when Wales rose against the crown. They chanted cheese and bread with a bloody loaf above their heads when the red flag flew in Merthyr town. The crown sent soldiers by the score till order was restored. Then came Dick Penderyn's execution, another martyr for the cause, meant to give us pause the next time people call for revolution. They chanted cheese and bread, and our children must be fed in the days when Wales rose against the crown. They chanted cheese and bread with a bloody loaf above their heads when the red flag flew in Merthyr town. Thomas in Cambridge says, my Facebook numbers need some help. Well, this is for sure, Thomas. My numbers overall need some help. If you notice, I never play in venues that seat more than 50 people on an average tour. Trans rights? Can I say trans rights? I certainly can. I can do even more than say trans rights. Can I sing a song that I wrote, please? I just have to remember the alphabet. Okay. Ever since the days when you learned to dress yourself, you would reach for certain clothing from your little shelf. You said, I want to dress like Mommy. And that's exactly what you did. You always did things differently from most other kids. You'd be playing with a doll or some other toy when someone would ask, is that a girl or a boy? Someone would call your given name with you there in your dress, leaving some to wonder, with others left to guess. Are you an innie or an outie? A princess or a king? Do you like to play with tractors or wear angel wings? What's inside that box? Is it a bullet or a pearl? As someone else must ask, is that a boy or a girl? You'd pretend that you weren't bothered, but it was clear you were. Then one day someone asked you what pronoun you prefer. Learning there were options, and the choice was yours to make. For you there was no question now which path you would take. You grabbed a piece of paper, signed it with a swirl as you announced, "My name is Guinevere, and I am a girl." Ever since the days when you learned to dress yourself, you would reach for certain clothing from your little shelf. And if I had a hammer, yeah, I will do If I Had a Hammer, and I will go then to hang out with my children who are confined to a bedroom at the moment with their mother, reasonably happily. But I thank you all for tuning in. I'll be doing oh, you like it? Oh, thank you. I will be doing more broadcasts every Monday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. New York, 6 p.m. GMT, 7 p.m. Central European Time, every Monday, live on various platforms. And I'm also available to do house concerts on your Facebook page or other platform. Go to davidrovics.com/quarantine to read about it. If you want to support me in these times of not touring, then you can go to patreon.com/davidrovics, or just don't worry about it if you're like in worse shape than I am, which is true for probably half of this country's population. So just enjoy the music and don't worry about that. What else? I don't even know what I got coming up, but if you get on my email list at davidrovics.com, that's the best way to find out about stuff that's going on. I'm on Twitter and Facebook and all kinds of places like that. And Reddit, YouTube. Got a podcast. My new songs go up on the podcast, Song for Today. You can find it on all the usual platforms, podcasting platforms. And another podcast this week with David Rovics, which is a bit longer form stuff, more occasional. Releasing my memoir, which weirdly enough is titled Waiting for Something to Happen. And something is now happening, but it's a 16-part memoir. I'm up to the 13th coming out this week for CSA members, community supported art members, but most of what I'm doing is free online, including my latest album, which I should mention, which was made, I sort of made it out of the recording that was made in the studio when we live streamed the concert on Thursday at Big Red Studio for the Canadian labor movement. It was also being recorded, much higher quality recording, while the very compressed live streaming was going on. We were making a great recording, which is now out as a free album that you can hear on Bandcamp. It will soon be up on Spotify. It's called Viral Solidarity, and I would appreciate you listening to it and sharing it in any platforms that you do that sort of thing on. And and since somebody requested another song that is not in the top 5 on Spotify, and I already feel bad for saying that, I don't mean to diss anybody who suggests the same song every time. It's probably different people doing it every time, and you don't notice how repetitive it is. I'm the one who does, and I'm sorry, and it's not your fault. And I'm glad you like those songs, but I still won't sing them. I watched it on the TV. Machine guns, fire towards the ground. I watched the people run. Helicopter gunship strafing the street. Watch them lining up the bodies in the Baghdad heat. They say these leaks had consequences, and I must agree. When I saw them fire on the children, it affected me. I thought, what if I were wearing the other shoe? If I had a hammer, what would I do? I am just a person, like anyone. I am just another mother's son. I have no special powers. I cannot fly, not like that helicopter gunship up in the sky, sending all those bullets all around to the journalists and children on the ground. I am just one man, that's very true. But if I had a hammer, what would I do? Sometimes I try to wonder, why should I care? But then the answer seems so obvious. There are people down there. And right here in Queensland, there's an army base. And there's a helicopter gunship just sitting in place. There's a time for watching. There's a time to act. It's just gonna kill more children if it remains intact. I am just one person, but you are too. If you had a hammer, what would you do? If you had a hammer, what would you do? Thank you all so much for listening. And if anybody has any suggestions for what I should talk about or sing about next week, then please let me know. Like particular songs or just more of greater interest, perhaps particular subjects. I'm happy to do anything. A workshop on songwriting or guitar playing or just anything that people might be interested in. And thanks so much for listening. Stay safe. Don't pay the rent. Don't pay the mortgage. And meet your neighbors in any ways you can. Tell them about the suspension of evictions. Tell them that the government will will defer mortgages if they are pushed to do so, as has happened already in European countries, many of them, and will happen more in others. Organize that rent strike. Organize your neighbors. Talk to people, and we'll see you. I'll see you in cyberspace, and stay strong, listen to lots of music, write songs, stay in touch. Bye-bye.